These carriers can use the stone to mow down entire civilizations like wheat.
If the movie theaters are able to go and be brought back for 2021, there are a couple Marvel movies that are set to finally arrive. One of them being Black Widow, which is very much hyped. However, the other movie that will hopefully arrive in 2021 is that of Eternals, one of Marvel's oldest, most curious, and most underused franchises for one reason or another. Despite their role in the Marvel Universe, a lot of people don't know a lot about them. As such, the upcoming movie has a lot of people speculating about what it'll be like and how it'll connect to the MCU as a whole. Allow us to show you 7 theories about Eternals. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Number 7, the Celestials' involvement. Let's start out with one that is confirmed in one form, but theorized to another. The Eternals are one of the creators of the Celestials, cosmic beings with incredible powers that, when combined, can reshape the whole universe without much effort at all. Anyway, the problem with Celestials is that they're very hard to reason with, and they tend to go and crush civilizations that draw their ire, which we saw in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 when a Celestial used an Infinity Stone to go and wipe out a planet. So what does this have to do with the Eternals? Simple. Fans theorize that the reason the Celestials are coming to our solar system right now is that of the use of the Infinity Gauntlet multiple times. Once in Infinity War and twice in Endgame has gotten their attention. They want to go and see why Earth is using such power so frequently, and that brings them to the table. Through the Eternals, we're going to hear more about the Celestials and how they shaped the universe. But also, the Eternals will be the first line of defense, if you will, and fight their creators to go and save Earth. It's very probable, and again, we know that the Celestials will be in the movie. But to what extent? That remains to be seen. Number 6, the arrival of the Deviants. If you don't know Marvel comic history, you might not know about the Deviants. You see, the Celestials came to Earth and started to experiment with life. This led to 3 different things happening. The first was that of the Eternals, the perfect beings with superpowers and immortality. Should they not fall in battle, of course. Second was that of the natural beings of the world that would eventually become mutants due to mutations the Celestials made. And finally, there were the Deviants. The Deviants were a failed project. They were monsters, grotesque in form and genetic code, and were rejected by the Eternals and the Celestials. They were allowed to live, but not to thrive. That didn't stop them from trying to get revenge on all parties, and they've had quite the role in Marvel Comics as a result. In fact, the Deviants are even said to be the ancestors of the Skrulls.
And so we need you to come back, because everyone kept asking me where the Avengers are.
Which we know are already in the MCU via Captain Marvel and Spider-Man Far From Home. Anyway, while the Celestials may be the big threat, we don't doubt that the Eternals will bring up the Deviants and possibly even show them battling on Titan or somewhere else. They could also be a threat in a sequel and thus be shown in the end credits scene should things go as expected. This race is too tied to Eternals' history not to be shown in some form, so expect it to happen. Number 5, Thanos. One thing that honestly hasn't been definitively said about the Eternals movie is that of the timeline, meaning where the Eternals takes place in the MCU lore. The reason this matters is Thanos. Thanos is an Eternal with a deviant mutation, which is why his skin is purple. We see Thanos on Titan during Infinity War, and he notes how the civilization they had was a paradise until they ruined it, and he had to destroy it. Furthermore, viral marketing for the MCU had a line from Thor talking about Thanos, stating that he is the last of an ancient and highly sophisticated species known throughout the universe as the Eternals. Keywords here being the last. If he was the last of the Eternals and he killed them all before the events of Infinity War, that would mean that this movie would be prequels to that movie and likely feature Thanos wiping them out, or setting the stage for Thanos to turn evil. It's hard to say because we honestly don't know where this story lays in canon, but Thanos is very likely to show up in one form or another. Number 4, History of the MCU. Here's a key one that could help tie a lot of things together. Because as the Eternals were technically born before the true human race, with and without mutations, that would mean that they are the ones who have watched over Earth at times and seen it progress. We know from Marvel that the Eternals are aware of the Avengers. And as stated before, Thor knows about the Eternals in some regard, so it could be that we get a history of the birth of the MCU and how everything is played out. Given that not too many casual Marvel fans know about the Eternals, that would be a safe bet. But wait, there's more. As noted, the Celestials were also responsible for the eventual rise of mutants. But since the X-Men aren't in the MCU just yet, they could spin this to state that it helped create the potential for superheroes, which one fan theory outlines as such. The Eternals will reveal the Celestials' experiments on humankind. As a result, human beings have an empty slot in their brain waiting to be filled with a superpower. Iron Man 3 has a scene where Aldrich Killian explains it to Pepper Potts. He says, "Extremis harnesses our bioelectrical potential, and it goes here." This is essentially an empty slot, and what this tells us is that our mind, our entire DNA in fact, is destined to be upgraded. The reason this theory clicks is because of how certain heroes and villains were born in the MCU. From Project Rebirth giving Captain America his abilities, to Captain Marvel getting her powers from the Kree device exploding near her, to Black Panther getting his abilities via the Panther Fruit, Wanda and Pietro getting their powers via the Mind Stone, and so on. These are external means to get powers, and their brains allowed them to upgrade, which means that the Celestials might be the reason there are so many superheroes on Earth. Number 3, the rise of mutants. This is a tricky one because, as we just said, the mutant race as a whole hasn't been mentioned in the MCU at all. We know about Inhumans via Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that terrible Inhuman series that we won't mention again, but not mutants. What's more, given the various tragedies that have happened on Earth, if someone like Wolverine, Professor X, Jean Grey, Cyclops, or someone else was there, they would have helped people and been noticed. That being said, that doesn't mean they're technically not out there, and it could be that we get hints of the mutant race via Eternals, including hints to characters like Apocalypse, aka Saban Nur, the first mutant. Depending on how it's portrayed, we could see this in the History of the MCU section we might get, which would be awesome in its own right. We know that Marvel Studios has the rights to the X-Men franchise now that they own Fox, and we know that Kevin Feige has said that the X-Men will arrive in the MCU.
Being in Phase 4, and if so, what was...
wanted more?
No.
Could this be the start of that? Number 2, Galactus will be teased. It's hard to talk about cosmic beings like the Celestials without talking about the world eater we know as Galactus. Galactus is very much a primordial entity, and yeah, he eats planets to sustain energy and stay alive. When he's hungry, he'll do whatever it takes to survive, even if that means eating a world with billions or trillions of life forms. The Celestials and Galactus have clashed many times, and depending on how they handle things, and the fact that the Fantastic Four franchise is also back with Marvel via acquiring Fox, they could go and tease his arrival in the future.
They dare steal from Galactus.
Number 1, further expanding the MCU's reach. One thing that the MCU has done in every phase is expand. Phase 1 was about introducing the different events, expanding their reach and going into space. Phase 3 was about setting the stage for Endgame. And now, Phase 4 is brand new territory. With the Eternals, we could get a deeper look into the life of the cosmic side of the MCU that the Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain Marvel haven't touched yet, including setting up key species that we could meet, like the Deviants, the Shi'ar Empire, Galactus, and the Celestials, and so on. Given that this is a low-key franchise, this would be perfect time to do it, as people wouldn't expect this from them, and it'd draw more interest.
Hey, who here hasn't been to space?
So what do you think? What do you think of this look at the Eternals and how things might go and play out in terms of characters, in terms of plot, and so on? Are you looking forward to this movie? Do you think that fans will resonate with it like they've done with Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, and so on? What do you personally think the film will feature? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.